This
recording.
conference will now be recorded.
That's another one of the differences, is that it actually will go and announce that it's recording and stopping the recording. All right, so this is January 2021 ArcGIS Pro Parcel Fabric Workshop. And as we were going through and all during last year, we kept getting requests. Well, why can't you have a discussion about enterprise deployment? What does it take? Where are the pitfalls? What are the easy things to do? Those sorts of things. So I figured we'd start off this year with that discussion on here. And my goal is just sort of go through a couple slides on how you actually go and deploy it on the enterprise, and then let some of those people who have actually done it and some of the clients describe not just what it was like, some of the issues they had, give us a little bit more. I know there's issues regarding annotation. How do you set up your structures? How do you set up the project file to make it as easy as possible for and as efficient as possible in the deployment? So that's sort of the goal for this session, is just go over that deployment and have an open question and answer discussion as well as anything else. So let's go through. I've got the standard, go to meeting interface, just so we make sure we understand how to go and do that. On the webcams, again, the webcams are being recorded on this set recording. Here's everybody that is in here. Here's our chat window. Chris is right now moderating the chat window, so if you have any discussion or any questions that you have, I'd like to have, Chris, say hi to everybody.
How's everybody doing today?
He will be moderating the chat window, and if you have any questions, and make sure that we at least get those answered on them. And here's the camera. Make sure you, if you have one, turn it on, and we'll go from there. So let's start with this. This was something I put together for one of our clients a while ago. What does it really take to do, and what is the timeline for this migration from your current data structure into the ArcGIS Pro Enterprise deployment? How long does it really take? And you can see from the steps on here that it starts out with just taking your existing data, going and cleaning it up, and then going through the standard migration, making sure that your schema is going to be acceptable, appending data on there. Then it comes to database setup, setting up the editing environment and symbology and data validation and feature templates and configuration. And believe it or not, we spend almost as much time on that as we do on just doing the data cleanup. It's quite intensive, and it's not trivial at all. And then we get into enterprise implementation. So what type of server, what type of relational database management system are you going to have? Do you have a data store? Have you installed the enterprise and portal? What about creating web services? Those sorts of things, and that'll take a couple weeks. And that involves a deployment also. And then we get into training. How does it work in Pro? How do you handle tasks and editing and versioning and that sort of thing, and then going live? If you look at this, you're probably looking at, you've got the 2, then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 weeks at the most. Sometimes it can be compressed down to 4 or 5 weeks. It depends upon how much you've got in place already and not, but it's a general timeline for what you need to do. So the actual cleanup and the migration, that really doesn't take up the most time on here. It's making sure that everything is working correctly as we go through. So let's just go over some rules that ArcGIS has put in place. All right, in that desktop and enterprise compatibility, you must comply with these. So depending upon the Parcel Fabric version. That's going to go and dictate what type of desktop software you can go use to edit that database, that Parcel Fabric, and then what type of enterprise software you need to go and actually be able to publish it and serve it out in services. Right now, there's strict compliance with that. Esri is sensitive to the fact that that means that every time you upgrade your desktop software, you would have to upgrade your enterprise. And desktop software comes out about at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. So there is some sensitivity on that. They have already announced that they're trying to go and get it set up so that they will let you span a couple of releases before you have to change your enterprise software again. Right now, the sweet spot is Parcel Fabric Release 3 using ArcGIS Pro 2.6 and Enterprise 10.8.1. And the reason why it's the sweet spot, we actually prefer the ArcGIS Pro 2.7, but the enterprise server software 10.9 is still in pre-release. It hasn't been fully released yet. And this was as of last week. So until there's a full release on that, I would not install pre-release software on anybody's server. I would not recommend it get done to anybody's server. So right now, the sweet spot, and when we're looking at enterprise deployments and talking to our clients, is always stay with your desktop at 2.6, go and put in 10.8.1 for your enterprise software. It means you don't have everything in place yet for 2.7, and there's some functionality that's missing, but that's the best place to be at the moment. All right. Any questions or comments on that? Please feel free to just pipe up. So then we get into the question of, all right, so what types of RDBMS systems does it support? And again, let's talk primarily about this release number 3 on here. And we can see that it supports Postgres SQL Server or SQL versions of 10.6.17, 9.6.17, 10.12, 11.7, and 12.2. The SQL Server implementations, this seems to be the one that most people have in place here. So it will go and support SQL Server 13.1, 601.5, and that was the earliest one on there. And they also can support Azure databases, some Oracle version 12.1.0.2. The Oracle Cloud versions are not supported at all. So you just be aware of that you want to also make sure that the enterprise, the Esri enterprise server software and the RDBMS are completely in compliance. So let's talk about licensing. Depending upon how you deploy it, if you want to go and look at enterprise deployment, it requires on the ArcGIS Pro license level either a standard or advanced. Standard is the lowest level at which you can go and do anything against the Parcel Fabric because it has topology rules associated with it, and topology requires a standard license. And that includes also that you want to get the GIS professional user type and the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric user extension. This was a big one in which they want that extension to be put in place there. The ArcGIS Parcel Fabric add-in license is required for this. And I'm starting to go and warn people about that. And there's a note here that says that the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric user type extension is applicable to ArcGIS Pro 2.5 and later, and Enterprise 10.8 or later. the license level is assigned to the named user as the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric. And there's a lot of confusion about this user type extension. And the reality is that it is for third-party applications. It's not for ArcGIS Pro, but third-party applications utilizing the REST capabilities of the ArcGIS Pro services. All right, that's really what that's for more than anything else. But Azure is requiring that you assign that now, that you obtain it and you assign it to a user in order that that functionality is going to work. You used to be able to get away without it before, but now you need to actually put it in place. Here's another thing that's on here is with 10.8.1, they've already found out in October that there is some performance issues on it. So there's a ArcGIS Server 10.8.1 Parcel Fabric performance patch that I highly recommend. If you're doing an enterprise deployment and you're at 10.8.1, which where you should be, you download and install this performance patch. And if you look it up, let me see if I can get in here and look it up. There is quite a bit of detail as far as what issues I actually identified on here. There's some bugs and branch versioning, especially in which it goes and times out if in fact posting versions back to default, if you've got more than say about 1,000 edits in there, it's timing out. This patch actually goes and fixes that. So please go ahead and download that and install that on there. It'll be worth your while to go and do that. All right. So let's talk about what process you actually have to do when you're looking at doing an enterprise deployment on here. You take your data, you go and you migrate it over to the ArcGIS Pro Parcel Fabric inside of a file geodatabase, and then what do you do after that? All right. No, Nancy and Christopher, I'm sorry, I actually saw it when Nancy put it up there. The patch is not for desktop. It's actually for the enterprise server software. And it only has to do with services. So if you're publishing this out so that you can do multi-editor editing, that's what it's for. It's not for the desktop. So the first thing you have to do is you have to go and take your Parcel Fabric and somehow get it onto your server. And there's actually a couple ways of doing this, but this is sort of the steps that we've worked through, and we're comfortable with these. And we've actually gotten some feedback from some of our clients on how they did it and what the best way to do it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a database connection, all right, and make sure that traditional SDE versioning is checked. And then you take the feature data set in your file geodatabase and you right click, and here it is here using the Arc Catalog pane in Pro. Right click on the feature data set containing the Parcel Fabric, select copy, and then go over to your SDE geodatabase connection, right click and say paste. And that connection should have the traditional SDE privileges to create the schema and the database. So you need to have the ability to create a schema on your relational database management system. I can tell you, and I can share with you, and I'm looking to see who's actually coming on and who's here. This step is the hardest step, because if you use the wrong connection, if you have the invalid permissions to do it, it will let you run through this and it will get to 3% and hang there for what seems like forever. It usually takes 15, 20 minutes, and then it will fail. You say, no, you don't have privileges to do this. You want to make sure that you have a connection that has the correct privileges, the SDE privileges, to be able to go and paste it in there. And Michael, are you here? Do you have a mic? Michael, can you turn? Okay, so Michael, can you share your experience, our experience when we first started doing this? Because Michael is with Bonner County, Idaho. They had their server in the cloud. They were using a service to go and do this. So what did we experience with this, Michael?
One of many things, I guess. When we did the copy and paste, it would stall out at 3%, and then it would sit at 3% for 10, 20 minutes, and all of a sudden it would just complete and go to 100%. So like the whole status bar was not updating.
Right. And it also turned out that one of our problems with it was we had upgraded it to a release 3 database. I think that's what it was. And but your server software was still one version back, and it would go through and we'd wait that 20 minutes or so for it, and it would fail and say that you can't install that on here because of that incompatibility. Go ahead.
Our issue was actually we had upgraded our enterprise to 10.6, but our Postgres database didn't get upgraded at that same time.
Yeah.
So our Postgres database wasn't compatible with the Parcel Fabric.
So you must make sure that everything is on that same level, or else it will get frustrating, because the error messages that you get back are really not explaining to you what the issue is. It's just saying it's failing and such. So just be careful, make sure that everything is consistent all the way across there. But even if that, yes, go ahead.
Kelly has a question in the chat. I thought you had to be connected as a user other than SDE.
For once you're going and doing editing, but in order to create that feature data set over on your server, you do have to have that SDE privileges to create the schema and to copy and paste that data in there. So this is the first connection, because there's actually 2 connections you need. The first one is to just get the data onto your server. All right, and that's again what this first step is, copying it onto the server. It's a good question, Kelly. Good question. But there are 2 connections that you need to your server in order to be successful with this. So if you're going through this catalog, copy and paste, which by the way is the most efficient way to get it over there, if that still fails, what we found is there's also a geoprocessing tool called Copy Parcels, in which you can go and select the parcel in using the geoprocessing tool, select that parcel fabric and say copy it, and then go over to a feature data set that's existing over in your server, and you paste it there and it will work. It is a slower option, but if you can't do that first, you can always do that second one. But again, this is the tricky one, believe it or not. This is the hardest one to get done. So Joshua, thank you. Joshua said, copy parcels work like a charm for them. I can share you, I've got a recent client here in Florida. We went through like 5 iterations and couldn't get those privileges set correctly until finally we used SDE. So you just want to make sure that this first connection has those privileges in there correctly. Thank you, Joshua. I'm glad you're here. So now, once we've got that in place, once we've got the data all stored on the geodatabase, now what we need to do is we need to create a second connection. All right, the one in which this is where the user owns the parcel fabric. And on there, what we're going to do is we're going to create this connection of the owner for the parcel fabric, and we're going to right click on the geodatabase connection property. On our connection in catalog, it's a new property setting that you have other than just connection properties. There's now a geodatabase connection properties. You right click on that and you make sure that branch versioning is checked. All right, that then allows that connection to go and access your data using branch versioning, not SDE versioning, which is what the first one did. Once you have that new branch versioning connection established, then there's a couple things you want to make sure that you have set correctly. The branch versioning requires global IDs on all feature data classes or feature classes inside of that feature data set for it to create services out of them. So if you have any additional feature classes in there, maybe you've got an extra one that's not part of the parcel fabric, or maybe you've got annotation that's in there, you want to make sure that you enable and say add global IDs to everything that's in here that you're going to go and publish. They need to have global IDs on them. Then once you've added global IDs, then you want to go and make sure that you enable editor tracking. Editor tracking is used to go and correspond with your branch versioning on there. All right. And then finally, you want to go and on the feature data set containing it, right click, go to manage and say register as versioned. This will then go and make sure that connection and those feature classes and the subsequent services that are being published all use branch versioning. I should note something here, and this sort of reminded me here with this. Annotation. Annotation is a unique animal. When you have feature linked annotation with branch versioning, because it uses global IDs, you have to make sure that those relationship classes are reset, because by default, the relationship class between the feature and the annotation usually uses the object IDs. Within when you're going to go and publish this using services, you need to reset each of those relationship classes to use the global IDs as your keys rather than your object IDs on there. All right. So then what you do is you make sure and ensure that it's registered as versioned. You right click on a feature class and check its properties, and under the properties it should state that the feature class is registered as branch versioned. Make sure you do that before you get on to the next step. All right, then inside of ArcGIS Pro, you open up with this new connection and you scroll down to the Parcel Fabric icon, which is the blue icon, and add it to a new map. And it's going to bring every single thing that's related to that parcel fabric into your map. And it's going to be a horrible gray parcel fabric symbology. It's kind of the symbology that Esri always uses with all of their demos and their meetups and everything. It's this horrible gray symbology. Don't worry about configuring it. You just want to make sure that everything gets in there. All right, that all these feature classes are connected over to there, that they're all loaded up there. And then, and this is the easiest way to do it, go into ArcGIS Pro on the Insert tab, add the Parcel Fabric Administration Tools on there. There's actually a task to walk you through publishing this. And what it actually does is says, okay, you have all this data loaded in ArcGIS Pro. Don't worry about the way it's configured. But now what you do is you open up the share map pane on there, and the task will do this. Go there and make sure the data is registered. Go to layer type and set that to features that you want to create a feature service. And then click on the configuration tab at the top of the pane and make sure that the version management checkbox is checked. Make sure that the validate checkbox is checked. If you do not see both of these, it means that the data that you brought in or the connection that you used to get to it was not a branch versioning that was registered as versioned on there. You have to make sure that both of those are there. And if not, you want to go through and check again. You missed something on here. If in fact you do not see both of these options on your feature services. Then it goes through and validate the share. Now, when you validate and analyze the share that's being set up, it probably, the odds are it's going to give you a warning about the data that's stored. It's not stored in a data store on your server. So to correct that, you go to any of these error messages that you're getting regarding this data store, right click on the error and just say, register this as a data store. And it will take that folder and register it with your portal as a data store. Joshua, fun fact, go to C, Programs, ArcGIS Pro, Layer Templates, to find the LRX files that the default symbology is coming from. Update the templates so anything else, if you're tired of all the gray, that's a great tip. I never thought about doing that, going and saving it out, saving the symbology as a layer file. And that way it will use that as a default symbology. That's a good tip, Joshua. Thank you. Thank you. So once you've got it published out, now what we do is, by the way, every time we do a migration, we provide a fully configured project file pointing to the file to your database, but you can use that to save you all the time to have to reconfigure it. You can open that up, and for every single layer in there that points to a file, a feature data set, go and point it over to the feature service, right? You go and do this by modifying the source locations inside each of those layers. That means your parcel fabric group, your points, your connection lines, your current tax parcel lines, your current tax parcel polygons, your historic tax parcel lines, your historic tax parcel polygons, all the way through. It's time consuming. And make sure you're pointing to the correct service when you do this. But it's time consuming, but you need to do it. And you need to do it correctly and pay attention to what you're doing. I can share with you, I have more than once gotten so bored with it that I pointed to the wrong service and it didn't work correctly. Take your time with this. This is critical. All right, once all of those data sources are completed, once you've reset your project file, so it points to those data sources, save it out. That's going to be your main template that you use and everybody uses to access all of those files on there. Usually what we'll do is we'll save it out, we'll get out of it, come back into it, and then we'll go to the table of contents and we'll look at the list by source and we'll see that that's a service. And then we'll right click on that service because it will say SDE default, we'll say default, not SDE default, it will say default. and we'll right click on there and create a new version that we can test. That will be a branch version. We'll test that for editing, and we will begin editing on there, testing to make sure that it all works and that we've got it all set correctly. That's it. It's easy. It's just easy to do that, right? I'm being somewhat sarcastic on here. So one of the things we have done is we have put together a link on here. We don't want to do that. A link inside of here for all of these tips and tricks for people that are looking to go and migrate into an enterprise deployment on here. And it's 9 pages of them. Again, I have to go and give shout outs to a lot of our clients who have gone and contributed to this. And things such as, once published, what do you do with it once you published it? Is there slowdown during labeling? Well, maybe you want to go and look at it and see when is it labeling, what your scale ranges are, look at whether or not you've got any issues on here. When you're editing, the auto apply in the attributes pane, that could be problematic because every time you click from one attribute field to another, it goes back to the server and then comes back again. It has to return that value on there. So maybe you turn off auto reply. And then there's a whole bunch of tips here as far as how much RAM it does and how many instances you have, depending upon the number of people you have working on it. I highly recommend you look at this if you're in a deployment environment, and we are more than happy to go and share this with anybody that's thinking about this. It's got a lot of good tips in it, and we continue every single day. We continue to go and put this in. Joshua, I'm actually going to go and put that tip in to this tips and tricks if you don't mind. All right, so now I want to stop talking for a while, or at least I want to reduce the amount of talking that I do for a while. So I'm going to ask those people that are administrators on their enterprise deployments, at least turn your mics on so I can at least see who can I ask, who can I talk to. I know, Michael, you're there. Joshua's here. Who else do we have here that actually has done some deployments? Joshua, I was hoping we'd have a couple more people here. That Joshua, don't worry about it being noisy. We don't care.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So let me go in so let me give you a chance to go and talk. Michael, why don't we start with you? You were some of the earlier ones. How many users do you have? What release are you using? What about the service software? Do you have annotation? What issues have you had? Those sorts of things. What can you share with us to help everybody understand sort of the intricacies of doing this?
Yeah, we're currently at 10.8.1 and the version 3, I guess, of the Parcel Fabric. We have
Right.
2 main editors, and we have a third that kind of maybe a few days a week does some editing as well. We really haven't run into any major snags once we got everything in place and working correctly. We did run into some snags getting everything up and running, and it was mainly due to I would say lack of good documentation to follow.
Yes.
So there was just some small little things that we ran into. We had a periods in our usernames for our portal users, and that was causing issues with our Postgres and with the branch versioning. So we removed that, and that was one big thing. And then the other thing, I guess, was increasing the instances. And I think what Ezra recommended at the time was number of editors plus 1 is the number of instances
Plus 1, yeah.
to use. And so as soon as we got all that set up, everything's been pretty smooth. There really haven't been any major issues.
How about speed? Have any of the users complained about speed, or are they fine with it? And I mean, is it faster or is it slower than your old SDE implementation?
I think it's slightly slower. But our editors don't really have much to compare it to, because they went from editing in ArcMap with no Parcel Fabric straight into Pro with the new Parcel Fabric, and so they didn't have any expectations really coming into it. So they haven't been complaining about it being slow. Could it be sped up? Maybe. There's maybe some things I could look at in this document and do some things to speed it up. And we are not using annotations in our stuff.
You're not using annotation. How much RAM? And I think I did a survey a couple of weeks ago. How much RAM do you actually have on your server?
Oh, to be honest, I'm not sure. We just switched a few months ago, maybe about 6 months ago, and I'm not sure exactly what our new servers are. I could look it up real quick here.
So while you're doing that, Michael, Joshua,
Mm-hmm.
can you introduce yourself and what you're doing and such? And that's
Yeah. So I'm Josh. I'm over here at Kendall County, Illinois. Kind of similar to Michael. We went directly from just a topology-enabled feature data set in ArcMap to the Pro Parcel Fabric and ArcGIS Pro. And also the old system, we were moving from a SQL server that was, I think it was 2008. It was old, and we were resetting it a couple times a day. So the fact that it even works is really nice. I don't have any unfavorable comparisons to before, but we were barely riding a bike before, and now we have a car. So it's hard to compare.
Yeah.
We are on the version 2 of the Parcel Fabric. We would have moved up to 3 by now if we could have, but we did run into an issue. We moved all of our stuff to the cloud, and we're using Amazon Web Services, and in particular, we were using RDS, the relational data store service for our Postgres database. And that worked fine for the first 2 versions, but as soon as we hit version 3 of the Parcel Fabric, the highest version of PostGIS, the Postgres extension that RDS supported, was consistently lagging behind the requirements for the next version of the Fabric. And it looks like that's going to be the case for 4 and probably 5 as well. I talked to,
There we go.
Yeah, so there's also, if you go to the Esri page, there's also a required minimum version of PostGIS.
Yes.
And starting at 3, that's 3.0.1, and in RDS you can only get up to 3.0.0. So basically, in RDS we were completely unable to move up to the latest Parcel Fabric, and we would just be stuck at 2. And RDS is nice because it's managed by Amazon. A lot of the maintenance stuff you don't have to do, but you don't get to pick the versions of the extensions they support. So just earlier this month, we actually we moved our Fabric over to just a Postgres database running on a separate EC2 instance, so that we had full control over the extensions. And since we're still at 2, we could move up to 3, but we're just going to wait until 10.9 and just leapfrog into 4, because then we can just keep using our tools as we've been grown accustomed to, and just make one big change once 10.9 comes out.
That surprised me because I'm going to pay you a compliment here. I forgot that you were only on release 2 of the Parcel Fabric, because I know you're doing some pretty amazing things with that release.
Yeah.
Using arcade and attribute rules and that sort of thing. So I hadn't realized that you were still back at 2 and 2.5 for the desktop. Yeah.
Too, but we're eyeballing 4, and as soon as we get it, there's a few subdivisions that we're going to be running some of the new tools on. I mean, thankfully, most of the standard editing stuff still works. It's just anything that's referencing the newer layers, like the analysis layers and the adjustments, those we can't touch.
Layers. Yes. Yeah.
We can't touch those. But some of the new stuff in 2.7, like merge points and merge collinear boundaries, those still work with a version 2. So that's been nice, at least, because the merge points tool is just a lifesaver.
Just said something that now makes me question. So am I correct in understanding you're actually using desktop 2.7?
Yeah, we're breaking the rules.
Wow, and you haven't had any issues or any problems with that?
No. So what we found last time, when we upgraded Pro last fall, I think, and we were still on version 1 of the Fabric, there were some pretty significant changes that happened between 1 and 2.
Yes.
And that made a lot of the editing requests to the server just weren't formatted in a way it was expecting. So we had certain tools just would not work. And for a while we had to roll back our Pro installation. So what we did, because man, merge points, I didn't want to wait for that if I had to. So what we did was just booted up our existing Fabric on one of our dev machines that had 2.7 on it, and tested our most common editing procedures to see if they executed properly, if the edits would save, reconcile, and post. And they did for all the tools that we would want to use on a daily basis. And the old tools still work as expected. I'm guessing most of the big changes in 3 and 4, coming up to Pro 2.7, I'm thinking most of those changes were related to the analysis layers and maybe some slight changes to the alignment tools, but they seem to work. I'm guessing the request that's being sent on the back end is still formatted in a way that version 2 can handle that.
It's very astute. I hadn't realized that probably was what was causing the issues, because we had experience with some other clients, that difference between 1 and 2, and you couldn't use 2 against 1. That was horrible. But
yeah, because from 1 to 2, that's where I think version 2 was, and the corresponding enterprise version, that was when Parcel Fabric became its own checkbox in the service capabilities.
yes.
If I'm not mistaken. So that was like just a huge difference to the service endpoint. But after that, it seems like the changes have been a little more minor, at least for standard editing stuff.
So you know what you just did? You just went that every single one of these administrators that are on an enterprise deployment are going to go back tomorrow and upgrade their desktop software to 2.7, because there's a couple things in 2.7. There is merge points, which is a great tool, unbelievable. And then 2.7 goes and fixes the clip function, where it actually goes and retains attribution after you clip. That's earth shattering, for anybody that's used earlier versions of Parcel Fabric.
There's a couple other nice things too. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the order of, like if you press the G hotkey and it gives you the distance and bearing entry, I think they swapped the order of those so that the vertical deflection is last or
Right.
something. I don't know.
Yes.
There's a couple like minor UI changes, but when you're entering Kogo stuff, it's super nice. Oh, and also, if you use the reverse lines tool, whether it's the geoprocessing tool or you're reversing a line in edit vertices, it flips all your Kogo bearings. So
Yes.
that's been really nice.
So just to remind everybody, because a couple of weeks ago we actually showed that the reverse bearing, actually what it is, it's in the edit vertices tool, and then you actually select that line and you right click and you can say reverse this and it will reverse it. And it reverses basically the start and the end point, but it also reverses the bearings for you, which is a really nice enhancement on it. So that, I just learned something from you, Joshua, and I'm so glad. Thank you. And I think a lot of other people are going to be very happy with that. So let's get down to, you don't have annotation, if I remember correctly.
We do not have annotations. We're on a Windows Server machine on AWS. It's an M5 X large, if that means anything to you. What else?
Any other lessons learned?
I think if we learned a lesson, it's that, so this might not be the same for everyone, but for us, the layers of the fabric that the members of the public see, those are not the same service. Those are just published to a hosted layer. So because we have this isolation between the public stuff and what we're actively editing, really, if that service goes down for a few minutes or sees some changes, it's only affecting us. And so if I learned anything, it's that, don't be afraid to pull the service down and make some schema changes and then republish it, because there were some things that I put off doing because I didn't want to mess with the schema. But really, it took maybe 30 minutes to turn it off, disable the topology, change the fields. Okay, hang on. Sorry, that's my son.
It's all right.
Cookies are ready. But anyway, there were just fields that I thought, oh, I wish this field was on here, or oh, that field really doesn't need to be on here. And I put off actually dealing with it, but then it's not that hard. And if your Parcel Fabric service isn't on any public facing maps, then the impact is just to, R3 staff if it's down for a few minutes. So that's.
Yep. The other thing I was going to go mention, thank you for mentioning that, is that things like changing attribute rules, because the attribute rules are off of the data set. In order to go and enable, disable, or modify your attribute rules, you do have to go and stop your service, make the change, and then restart the service. But it's not that big a deal anymore. It's not like you have to go and rec and post everything because of branch versioning.
So that's been nice. Also, I don't know if you've talked about it before, but depending on how your cadastral stuff is organized, definitely consider putting subtypes on your parcel feature classes, because the Esri has put a ton of work into making subtypes like a really integral part of the parcel fabric. So right now, if I used the copy lines to, or if I use the duplicate parcels tool, the dialog that pops up normally just prompts you for the layer you're copying to. But if one of those layers has subtypes enabled, the dialog gets extended and you can choose a specific subtype to throw it into. So for us, we have, we just added subtypes so that we can keep track of like, oh, this is these are the leasehold parcels, because normally we don't care about those as much as the ownership ones, or these are the dedicated versus the fully conveyed right-of-ways. Where they don't really need their whole separate feature class in the parcel fabric. Most of the fields are completely in common. and we would want them to be in the same layer. But adding that subtype gives a little more separation, and the parcel fabric is built to accommodate subtypes, but only on parcel feature classes, not on lines or points.
Correct.
I learned that the hard way.
Yes, correct.
Don't use
Interesting.
subtypes. Even though like having subtypes on connection lines, I think is really important if you're gonna fully use that feature class. But
Especially since there's so many different ways that you can use connection lines. You can use them as origin connections going from a point of commencement to a point of beginning. You can use them as right-of-way widths. You can use them as center lines. There's so many different ways that you can integrate connection lines into your fabric.
We're using them for, you know, half a dozen different things, and they're all different and equally useful. But yeah, the only way to do different types on lines right now is to just symbolize based on a field. You can't really do subtypes.
Yeah. Set up a separate attribute field and not make it a subtype, but just make it a different code for your attribution. Yeah. Thanks. So I just saw that somebody just came on. Michael Vander Sanden, can you unmute your mic and maybe turn on your webcam? So Mike is Washington County, Wisconsin, and he's deployed enterprise level, and he recently has begun experiencing some issues with annotation. So Mike, I know you just got off that call with Esri. Did they solve your problem?
Thankfully, they did solve my problem. And I will, just for the sake of anybody else that might be or have fallen into this trap, fortunately, it seems like the problem has been solved by ESRI. But what happened was earlier this week, I went to install the performance patch on server, and I decided, well, what the heck, I'm just going to install all the updates at once and get it over with. Well, apparently there was a second utility patch that they had just released a few days ago that broke the parcel fabric. That causes this 500 error to come up anytime you do editing. And so ESRI literally just released yesterday a new version of that utility patch that solves that problem. So now I'm back up and running, thankfully.
Yeah, well, I'm glad of that. Yeah.
Me too.
So I know you missed some of the early discussion. I just went through sort of some of the tips and tricks that we've had on here on going and deploying on an enterprise level. So can you share with us, and I know you're probably one of the newer deployments up there, what issues you might have had, or what things that sort of tripped you up on your deployment?
Sure. So I think it really comes down to annotation for us. You know, publishing wasn't an issue. You know, that seemingly went pretty well. With the exception of once I republished, I found that problem that you pointed out in the tips and tricks, that you should put the annotation layers that you're adding to the bottom, because it just numbers everything. So that screwed up my document. So, but that wasn't too hard to get over. But no, it's really annotation that's been the issue for us. You know, I've learned to pretty efficiently now use the tools that Pro has provided to you know, remap splits, do merges, you know, whatever, in a fairly efficient manner, and I'm really embracing it. But what I'm really struggling with is a way to efficiently edit our annotation layers. And you know, maybe part of the issue is the way that our schema is modeled. You know, we have a lot of annotation layers. We have an annotation layer for almost everything, you know, tax key, acreage, dimension, lot number, plat number. They're all individual annotation layers. And what I'm finding is that, you know, I map a new CSM, a new 4-lot CSM, you know, and then I do that in a fairly efficient way. But then when it comes to add the annotation, you know, I have to add the dimensions to each side, and there's a slight refresh to update that annotation with the feature service, and that I didn't see in ArcMap, obviously. And once the dimensions are done, then I have to add that plat number text to each of the 4 lots, and the same with the lot number, the text. So I end up, spending way more time on adding all these annotation features than I did actually mapping the parcels. And so I guess, we had a little bit of a discussion about this earlier, Frank, and I don't know if there's anybody else that has some experience with this, but what I guess I'm pondering is whether it would make more sense to pull all those annotation features out of the branch versioning feature data set, put them back into their own dedicated feature data set, and publish them out as and just edit them as directly in SDE to eliminate some of that lag time. So I don't know if anybody else has any opinion or any experience with that. I sure would appreciate any advice.
Yeah, I think that we've got a couple other administrators on here, and I'll have to share with you, none of them use Anno.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, and that comes back to that same discussion. Do we still continue to maintain Anno, or is the labeling server sufficient enough to be able to go and allow us to do it that way for whatever maps?
Can I throw that question out to people? Those people that aren't using annotation, are they finding that the ESRI labeling tools are providing an adequate level of, we're still stuck in a mindset in our county that our tax listing department wants hard copy maps every year, and that's really the primary reason why we continue to maintain that annotation. They demand knowing or seeing these specific pieces of text in these specific places, and if there's similar operations out there that have those demands, is labeling meeting those needs?
So we're going to open it up. Anybody want to go and talk? Cindy or so Joshua notes in here in Beta Map Viewer, labeling options are much better than in the JavaScript 3.x web maps.
Yeah, I'll just pop on the mic for a second. So because we have just hosted layers for what the public sees, the standard labeling options of a hosted layer, if it's a polygon, it's just like smack on the centroid, which if you have a parcel and a lot that share the same shape, well, then it's just whichever one's higher in the table of contents. And that was pretty annoying. But in the JS 4.x stuff, such as the map viewer beta and experience builder and all that, you can set up as many label classes for a layer as you want and apply filters, different styles, and scale ranges for them. So it's still not everything that's available in in Pro using Maplex or using annotations, but just the fact that I can have a map based on hosted layers and tell it to put my my pin for my parcel, have a Y offset of 5, and have the lot labels have a Y offset of -5, and then they appear one over the other. So there's basic stuff like that. The other thing too is if you're on 10.8.1, they introduced hosted map images. So if you have a hosted layer, you can open that in Pro and apply as fancy of symbology and labeling as you want, and publish that as a map image, which references the hosted layer's data, but acts like a map feature service or map image service. Sorry. So you can have some of the nicer labels, but still working off of a hosted layer rather than relying on just your Parcel Fabric service to produce those labels. This is not using annotations, but this is just to say that with the latest versions of stuff, there are ways to take just a standard hosted layer and using either the options in the latest map viewers or using the hosted image layer, you can get some really nice looking labels. We had, I took it down, so I'd share you the link otherwise, but we had a hosted image layer of our boundaries data, and that, you know, it had the curved labels. It had basically the same as the Kogo labels with the curves, the radius and length, and the different classes. And it looked as good as anything that you would find on our county's tax maps. But it was a dynamic layer that would refresh as you panned around and zoomed in. So we essentially had a web map that was showing everything the tax maps did, but fully dynamic, and it didn't have to rely on a traditional server service. It was just pulling directly from a hosted layer. So I just said a whole lot, but hosted image layers and just some of the, if you don't need anything so advanced, just the labeling options in the JavaScript 4 maps. That has really helped our maps look nicer without adding really any additional cost of time and resources on the back end. So that's what we found.
Thank you.
And I'll tag along with that, just speak on the department side. So we also had a requirement that we couldn't just get rid of our paper tax maps, but we could sidestep it in a way to allow for PDF maps. So if they wanted to print, they could, but we wouldn't supply a paper book anymore. So our assessor still wanted a paper or at least PDF tax map book of the 2019 tax parcels, but with us not having to supply paper anymore, it saved us money by not having to print books that either nobody uses or one person uses one page once a month. That this way everything's accessible. And then because they're PDFs, we made everything in a tax map application, which I can put in the chat so you guys can see what we kind of did. And that way people didn't have to go through every single annual book. They could actually grab the section they wanted and then see every year that we've been able to scan in, but see every year and see how that area changed. And we seem to win over a lot of people by not having the paper anymore, but having a better application to see all the books and then print only what they needed and not have to come in to view these books. So that is another way we kind of got around it. Yeah.
Thank you.
If you click on 1-3E 2019 on the left, you'll see our maps that we made last year. We have go down one to the 1E19. Yeah. So these are our new tax maps. And so this is all completely accessible and people can pull it all out. So we don't have acreage on these. Something we want to do in the future is make your own tax map. So it'd still access the same 2019 data, but you'd be able to zoom in on a particular parcel and get every single bit of information that we couldn't fit because of labeling or something. But that's kind of how we got around it.
So Michael, just to you may have been out earlier. That was Megan and Joshua from Kendall County, Illinois. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That's great. So, in looking through the chats, Victoria Myers from Jefferson County, West Virginia says no labels. They don't meet her needs. And by the way, Tori also produces printed maps, and she's still at that point. Jim from Waukesha says the only anno layer we use for parcels anymore are the dimensions. We found that labeling sufficient for all the other on ArcGIS server. Mark Voles from up in Minnesota says labeling works. I'm curious about who maintains various types of measurements: GIS measure distance, survey distance, recorded distances. Hopefully these measurements are always the same, but they can be different. Mark, I remember you and I had this discussion about that and how to actually go in and bring that in. I'm not sure whether anybody's at that point yet. Nancy von Myers saying, I wonder if the cost to maintain the anno for a single purpose hard copy for one department when the info is available from another source is a good use of resources. That's a great point, Nancy, is that, you know, what's the cost benefit on this, and what's the overall cost of that? So, and I didn't want to get into specifically a discussion about is Anna worth it, but I think it is one of those things that as we make the transitions between these technologies, we at least have to start thinking about, you know, our customer base, our client base, and whether their requirements that they have, that they verbalize to us, are really what should be driving our adoption of things, or whether we can convince them maybe they can change a little bit on there. So, but yeah, it's interesting. I also was wondering, I know that I remember that Bill Cousins up in Waukesha was actually maintaining raster tiles. They were doing raster tiles for all of their dimensioning and doing those purposes, and got me thinking, well, maybe vector tiles, but I know vector tiles still have some issues with some labeling often, but vector tiles might be a way for you to go and do that also on those boundaries that you're looking for. Because the dimensions always is the toughest anno that we're trying to maintain. I did also want to go in and show you that I was reminded earlier, thank you, Joshua, vector tiles are difficult to update dynamically. I was mentioning earlier, I was doing some training earlier today on to a group that was looking at high quality map labels and how to go and set them up. And there's a recording of a meetup. It's about an hour and 15 minutes long, in which they go through some of these options, and they're actually going and looking at utilizing things like arcade and to go in and not just establish when, but where. And this is a really interesting meetup that they did. I can make this available, this recording available for you if you want. Again, it's about a year old now, but it is ArcGIS Pro creating high quality map labels. Again, I can make that available and put that into the folder that everybody gets access to if you're looking for it. So CAM and are always on the bottom of the table of contents. Line labels in the vector files will repeat per tile. Yeah, they do. They do, sorry. And are always at the bottom of the table of contents. Thank you. So we've mostly been talking amongst ourselves. So what questions do we have? Because I know there's a lot of people here. There's several people here who are right now contemplating moving into an enterprise deployment of this. So what questions do you have? We've got the experts here. They're here. Let's talk to them. Let's ask the questions. So feel free to turn on your mic, ask the questions, or go and put something in the chat window. But let's see if we can get some of these things answered on here. I know, Jim, you had some questions about this. So I'll open it up. Does anybody have any questions right now for those people here? By the way, this is usually when we hear crickets. Nobody asks a question. So
Yeah, I was just going to say there's nothing in the chat immediately.
yeah, sorry. Did we scare everybody off on what it really takes? It's really not that tough. The biggest problem is making sure that you have the resources available, that you make sure you line everything up beforehand. By the way, I'm going to use Joshua's tip and going to recommend everybody start using 2.7 from ArcGIS Pro against your distributed, against your enterprise. Fun question, is everyone else's right away just really awful? So Joshua, can you explain that a little bit more?
Oh, I'm just having fun because we Cam has talked to someone who I think works for Iowa, and their right of way is bad too, and it seemed like a common thing. But no, I mean, a lot of our data we just inherited from former staff, and the right-of-ways, in a lot of places, they just took the center lines and buffered them and then clipped everything. But in a lot of cases, there was no legal basis for doing that.
Right.
Found that there's places where the right-of-way is the wrong shape. The parcels should still extend to the center line, but don't, or they do, but they shouldn't. And then the right-of-ways were just merged into one enormous countywide feature and then split at quarter section lines, which left all kinds of multi-part slivers, and it was
yeah.
We just nuked the whole layer, and we're adding in document-based right-of-way shapes as we come across them, kind of going backwards in time. But you know, it was just so bad. It would have been more work to fix them than to just start from scratch. You know, one of those things.
So that brings, Joshua, sorry to interrupt. That brings up a really good question. I think we can reword this slightly. We have a client down in Texas that, and we're finding this is the same issue, that those people that have been in ArcMap Parcel Fabric, because inside of ArcMap Parcel Fabric, the rights of way are required to make sure that there's contiguity and that you don't get coordinate creep between them. I think the question is, even if you are coming from ArcMap Parcel Fabric into the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric, do you need right-of-way polygons? That's the first question. And then secondly, we can almost guarantee that there are no right-of-way polygons in existing parcel fabrics that are worthwhile keeping. If you're going to keep them, are you going to recreate them, and how are you going to recreate them? That's I think a really good discussion, a good question that we probably could have a discussion on.
What we've done, because we want our public layers to be as useful as possible, and so when we published out our hosted layers, we actually did it off of a query layer so that we could join in some of the record attributes. Because right now, yes, there's a created and retired by field, but they just have a global ID in them. So on our hosted layers, we actually use the records table to add in fields for what document created it by name and what date that happened. So that if somebody's looking at our maps and they say, well, what's this right of way? And they click on it, it will tell them this highlighted section of right of way was dedicated in this document on this date, or it was retired on this document by this document on such and such date. So we want our features to be useful in that way. So we're drawing them up with Kogo and everything, just like any other parcel. But I would, if I could have gone back and redone things, I would not have brought in right of way when the data was initially migrated to the fabric. Because I will say there are certain things that if I had to go back, some editing would have been easier in like just a simple topology enabled data set, or even a file-based geodatabase. And now that they're in the fabric, we have all of these hydro boundaries that have no legal bearing. And actually, in the legal documents, there are established lines for like where the boundary is, and a measurement and a bearing, but they clipped it to hydro so that it would look nicer. And they had a hydro layer in the old topology. But what that made was every parcel along the river has, 50 segments, and in between each segment is a fabric point. Now, merge points is helping with that, but it would have been a lot simpler to get rid of certain layers prior to migration, or clean up some of this stuff with like a basic alignment tool before migrating it, and then ending up with Yeah, redundant lines, like Cam just put in the chat. And I think that's one of the benefits of the Pro Fabric is you don't have to have every gap filled by something.
Right.
I would have just as soon brought in the things that we knew were good and then added things later as we had them. But
Well, the other benefit of the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric is the fact that you can have both 2-point lines, the normal type of Kogo lines, and you can have poly lines in there for those riparian types of features for the hydrology and other elements. You can have them in there and it doesn't impact like it
we've
did
been
in the
having
ArcMap
those
Parcel Fabric. Yeah.
because there are plenty of deeds that say, just 400 feet along the river.
Yep.
And if you drew it as a straight line or even a curve, it wouldn't match the shape very well. But we can at least get that distance Kogo attribute, but add a polyline instead of a bunch of 2-pointers. Yeah,
Right.
we found that to be super helpful as well.
Yeah, we've actually been thinking about the migrations from the ArcMap Parcel Fabric, whether or not we should try to go and do something like that along those hydraulic lines, in that maybe we do a merge lines before we do the import on them, to make it a little bit better and easier to handle.
Yeah, there's also I don't know if you've talked about this tool much, and we haven't been able to use it as much just because everything's already in place, and it's better just to use the specific tools for adjusting the fabric. But the simplify by straight lines and
use it all the time. All the time we use it, and we use it mostly to go in and correct densified curves, but there are other uses for it, definitely. Yeah.
But I could see, we adopted the Pro Fabric before that was an option, but I could see that as having been particularly useful for some of our areas in like a pre-migration cleanup.
Especially since they now allow you to utilize that on polygons as well as on the lines.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, there are some really nice improvements both in 2.6, in ArcGIS Pro 2.6 and 2.7. That one, the ability to go and do simplify on polygons inside of 2.7, the ability to go and build a polygon using the Traverse file, or not the Traverse file, but the Traverse tool, is a great improvement. One of the ones that we've been looking at for a long time and trying to get them to implement. That's another one. Although it might not have as much use for Parcel Fabric, there are uses for building polygons for zoning and other elements in there. So
yeah,
cool. Good points. So what other questions do we have regarding deployments? Anybody have any questions on here? By the way, Joshua, I'm going to go and lobby you and Megan and Cam to come back and do a full presentation, because like I said, I've seen and I've gotten some indication on some of the work that you're doing with Arcade and expressions and pop-ups and things like that. And it looks like really good stuff you're doing. So I'm going to lobby you to come back and give a presentation sometime in the future.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
Yeah, like I said, I like what you're doing there. So any other questions on here? Any questions about the deployments that we described? It is tricky. You want to make sure that you plan it out before you go and do it, but it is achievable and it's worth it. No. All right, you know what I might do? I think I'm going to stop the recording right now, and we will go and move into what we traditionally call our office hours, which is we turn off all the recording and we just open up everybody's mics and we just have an open discussion about what's going on and such. So be sure to come by next week to the deep dive workshop. Nancy and I are going to continue our discussion Nancy's been doing some really interesting work and putting some blogs up there and had some thoughts, and hopefully you get a chance to come back. And again, it's a different invite. Make sure you get the right invites in here. So please come back next week. We're also looking for new ideas for next month's workshops, both for the ArcGIS Pro and for the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric. Please give us your ideas. Mark, that's some good suggestions on how to go and handle the different types of measurements. As a surveyor, I'm very interested in that, but I'm not quite sure how many other people really are going to go to that level. We'll have a discussion on that. So I'm going to stop the recording and let's move into office hours. Thank you all. Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.